In this video, we'll be exploring identity from a number of perspectives that I find fascinating. It all begins with the one, the possibility field, the undifferentiated ecology, the unity of all things, before it is divided by language into duality, into triality, into all the different geometric shapes that are possible, the possibility field, when we start to divide the one into pieces. Once we divide the one into pieces, we have language. We have mathematical language, and we have words. Words take the body and divide it into thousands of bits. But the bits are an illusion because every bit affects all the other bits. And the body is interdependent, or is certainly dependent on a larger body. Right? You don't get a child without parents. You don't get parents without grandparents. And you don't get mammals without Earth. And if you're in a dependent relationship, it's an interconnected relationship. And if you are dependent and interconnected, you are one. Right? The bits created by language are an illusion. Now, there have been 10,000 renditions of the one, meaning every cult, every culture takes the one, takes the possibility field, and divides it with language and with emphasis into a shape, right? It takes the endless curve, the infinite whole, and breaks it into some form of system. And the system is necessary for human thought because consciousness cannot keep up with the complexity of reality. It can only keep up with the simplicity of our map of reality. And that's a really important thing to understand, that there is more going on in a thumb than the conscious mind can catch up to in an entire lifetime. Just one thumb of one hand has so many subatomic particles doing so many things that in every second of the existence of a thumb, we've got more than a year of analysis that we could do on the different movements. We'd have to slow down subatomic particles to the point where thought could catch up with them, and then track their dance with one another. And to track the dance of a second of a single thumb would take years if we go down to a small enough level. And by that time, right, many, many, many more seconds have happened. Years worth of seconds have happened, right? In other words, we can never catch up to the reality of a thumb. What we can catch up to is the symbol of a thumb. Now, even by the time we say thumb, the thumb has changed significantly, all the different interactions going on. But we can hold it in mind, right? We can say the word thumb as a proxy, as a representative, as a symbol for the underlying reality. And we can somewhat catch up with our symbols, but words are very, very slow. I'll often see a gestalt of an idea, a gestalt of geometry, and it takes a second to see the relationships of shapes. It takes a second. It takes me an hour and a half and counting to begin to suggest some of what occurred in that second, right? So words are very slow, even with symbols, right? Because when we talk with lines, we're talking with symbols. Lines don't really exist. Dots don't really exist in isolation, right? It's all part of an interconnected whole. And so we create the lines between the illusion of stationary dots to allow us to create a mental map, a dumbed down version of the underlying reality that we can relate to. And thus, on the foundation of language, we have thought. And on the foundation of thought, we have human consciousness. We have the conscious mind, which is, in many ways, an analysis and a generator of maps of reality through language that are not real, but they suggest things about reality. And they can be useful. Maps are not real, but they can be useful. A map of all the streets of New York City is not all the streets of New York City. It's a map. It's a symbol. But the symbol is still useful, even though it's an illusion, right? All those ink lines, this way, right way, little names, right? That has nothing to do with the underlying reality. The little names on the bits of paper or on the screen are symbols for the signs on the road, but those aren't real. If it says Marigold Street, it's not a street filled with marigolds. It's a very complex pattern of energy that is suitable usually for some form of transportation that has been symbolized, that has been given a name. But you will find Marigold Street and Marigold Street all over the world, and they're all different. And most of them don't have a single marigold on them, right? It's just made up. And so you have layers and layers and layers of symbol. And as a result, most of us, most of the time, are completely unaware of reality. What we're aware of are the established patterns of representing reality in thought on the foundation of language. And language is a dumbed down symbol. Language is the first symbol in many cases. You look at something and you say, mama, dada, right? Dada is not the same as that male that produced the sperm, right? Dada is a symbol for that male. And the word male does not cover the complexity of all that human being is, right? It creates an idea. There are plugins of other words that are synonymous with male. Right? And if I say blue t-shirt, male wearing blue t-shirt, blue and t-shirt is not this, right? It's a symbol for this. And it's a very, very dull symbol, right? The mind doesn't begin to grasp all the movement, all the dynamics, all the dimensions of a t-shirt, of any part of reality. And so once we have words, we enter the map. We identify with the map of reality. The ego clenches. I, the definition of the distinct pattern of identity, I identifies, clenches to a pattern of thinking. That is a pattern of organizing words. That's what a thought is. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. Right? That's an organization. I am going to be late. Right? It's just words. It's a pattern of words. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. Now, each of those words is part of a map that fits into the map of the cult. For example, being late. You cannot be late. First of all, the future doesn't exist, right? The past doesn't exist in any experiential thing. There's an idea of a future and a past, but it doesn't. And late, right, is resting on the idea that is created, right? Because some cults have no watches and have a very different relationship with time. And everything happens at the right time because it's part of life. And so whatever happens, that's the time, right? If life is, then how can you be late and be part of life being, right? Whatever you're doing exactly what you're doing on the moment you're doing, whether that's connecting with the words, right? The word map says, I will be on time. And then the words say, I'm going to be late, meaning that those two statements don't line up. But those two statements are not reality, right? The person that says, I will be on time and is not on time was presenting a symbol of a projected reality that wasn't real. And so all that's happened really is they've diverged from the symbol, which meant the symbol was not a useful symbol, right? If someone says, I'll be there at 3 and they show up the next day and you've already left, well, then it wasn't a useful symbol of reality. It would have been more useful if they said they would show up the next day at X time, because then you might be there, right? But the anxiety is also a series of associations with the words being late, right? Good people are on time. Good people are reliable. Good people are solid. Solid people are reliable. Reliable people do what they say they're going to do. And people who say they're going to do are on time. And good people get rewarded, and bad people get punished. It depends. These are the narratives, right? This is a pattern. So I'm going to be late means I'm a bad person who's going to be punished within a given cult context, right? I'm not going to do business with so-and-so. They're unprofessional, right? What does that mean? Professional means you do something for money, right? But the word has been loaded with different correlations, right? So we're really navigating our own maps and other people's maps of reality. And they're not real. They're maps of reality. But the ego identifies, clenches to the map, to the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, which all rest on the foundation of language, right? If I say I'm feeling vasta, that doesn't have a meaning to you, right? If I say I'm feeling sad, you see, that has meaning because it rests on the foundation of your language. Now, what does it mean to you, right? So the stoicists might say you shouldn't be talking about it, you should be enduring it. The empathists would be saying, oh, you need comfort and support. The shamers would be saying, you know, you useless person, why are you telling me this, right? But why? Because each of those believe a different story, meaning each of those have identified, have clenched onto a pattern of thought based on language. So there have been 10,000 cults in human history, and each of them has a different language. Each of them has different symbols for the underlying reality, and each of them, once they create a grid of symbols, which basically means you take the one, you take reality, you cut it into bits that are in scale, right? We don't talk about subatomic particles because they're too small relative to us. They're not too small relative to atoms. They're too small relative to us, right? If we said move 3,700,500,000,000 subatomic particles to the left or to the right, right? That's not as useful as 1 inch, right? Because 1 inch is kind of in scale with us. It's within 100, right? Whereas subatomic, you're talking about trillions of things. So we like to see things at our scale. So we don't talk too much about, galaxies. We're not, it's too big relative to us, right? Because we're self-centered. We're centered in ourself. And so relative to us, those things are too small, those things are too big. So we deal on the infinite continuum of scale. And there's no reason to begin to suspect that we've reached the limit of the smallest things or the largest things, right? We talk about the universe, the verse that is one, the universe. The verse, the song, the statement, the pattern, the sound, the uni that is one. And then we sometimes talk about the multiverse, the sound, the pattern that is bigger than one, right? The many verses, right? And so we have divided the world into a grid of meanings, usually referencing a polarity, an up and a down and places in between, a hot and a cold and places in between, a forward and backward and places in between, right? And then we connect, once we've cut the world into pieces, our pieces, with our language, we then create a narrative. We create a story. You see, some cults will take this grid here and they will connect this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit, right? And that looks kind of linear, so they create somewhat of a linear story by kind of focusing on this progression. And see, other cults do it differently. They connect this bit and 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 this bit. It's kind of more of a circular story, right? Because you can just go around in circles if you connect these bits. You're reestablishing the one in a certain way at a certain size. So you're connecting the bits that way. That's your main narrative, but you can connect them any way you want. And if the bits are too big, you just create sub-bits, a little bit and a lot, right? You just create sub-bits, a very little bit and a very little bit and a lot, right? A lot, right? You just divide the bits into smaller bits. And the more small the bits are, the longer it takes to communicate about them, right? If we try to communicate about subatomic particles in the thumb, it just takes a tremendous amount of time. But if we just talk about one thumb of one person at one point in time, just say one thumb, right? very quick, right? But we're looking at scale. We're looking at how detailed is our map, right? Imagine Google saying you want to drive by the tree with 21,000 leaves of pine cones. So look out for a pine tree that has about 1,000 pine cones, and then each pine cone has 21 little bits of the pine cone sticking out, little flowerets, little whatever they're called, seeds, I think. And so you drive by, 300 pine trees with 21,000 pine seeds in each pine cone, right? Well, that's less than 1% of 1% of all that's gone on, right? Because Google could say fly by the 32 bird nests and fly, and drive by the bird that has 209 million strands of feather. And that's just moved you like 10 feet, right? And you're counting the feathers, So this is all just too complicated. And so Google just says, drive straight for 14 minutes until you see a symbol called Huckleberry Street, and then turn left on Huckleberry. So simple, right? You just ignore 99.99% of all that is, and you just drive, and all you do is look forward and, Huckleberry, right? It's so simple, right? So you can travel so far and miss so much. And all that you're aware of is 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of reality that you've labeled and then prioritized because it's useful. Amongst all those things, how many millions of feather hairs and how many tens of thousands of little pine seeds and pine cones and however many hedgehogs were passed and however many million blades of grass, none of that was as useful as that little symbol called Huckleberry Street. And there aren't any huckleberries, right? There's no huckleberries on it. The sign is not made out of huckleberries. It's not even blue. Not even painted with huckleberries. It's just a pole, a little metal sheet. And it's called Huckleberry because it's a nice idea to differentiate it from Raspberry Street and Strawberry Street, which also don't have any strawberries, don't have any raspberries, right? So these symbols are incredibly abstract. And the ego, the I, clenches, identifies with these symbols of reality, not with reality, right? The ego is completely overwhelmed with reality, but the symbols of reality. I am a successful person because I drive a Porsche. I am a, what? I am a something, right? You fill in the blank because of this other thing, fill in the blank, right? And so this is a map, right? It's not reality. It cannot be reality. The ego cannot comprehend reality. It can comprehend tiny bits of energy through the lens of language, right? So that's the ego. That's what the ego is doing. And every ego is a micro, is a micro version of the cult. And every cult is the macro version of the egos of the cult members, right? And to be in a cult, you just have to have a set symbol of reality. You have to group those symbols in a repeatable way, right? So that's how you can tell that's that cult, right? They always wear feathers. They always wear the red feathers, right? They wear the black feathers. They wear the red feathers. That's their symbol. That's how you know it's that cult, right? They're the ones with the red feathers. And they call the red feathers this, and they talk like this, and they behave like this, and they eat like this, and they cook like this. So there has to be a pattern. To have a cult, to have a culture, you have to have a pattern of emphasizing things, a pattern of organizing symbols. That's all words are. And we're not dealing with reality. We're dealing with the symbols of reality. We're dealing with the way that reality has been cut up into pieces. And when we have war, it's generally because other people have given different symbols to reality, and they've cut them up in a different way, and they've organized them in a different way, and they're not compatible, right? It's like trying to play a CD on a record player. It's a lovely, lovely CD, Beethoven Symphony, right? You put the CD on there. Kind of fits over the hole. It's a little wobbly, right? But you put the record needle there and nothing. It just scratches the CD, right? Because they're symbolizing sound through vibration on the needle. And the CD folks are symbolizing sound with light depth, right? They're flashing a laser, and the laser is penetrating different depths and going up and down and going over this mountainscape of different heights. And it's transforming that into sound, right? Now, those things going up and down are not sound. And those little grooves going back and forth are not sound, right? They're symbols of sound, which when amplified in a certain way, and it's more so the case with a CD. A CD is far more symbolic because it has to turn light into sound. Whereas a record just has to amplify certain grooves at certain pitches, right? There's a speed that it's going by, and it's making those sounds at a very dull, very low volume level, and it just needs to be amplified. So there is actually some correlation with the experience of that needle making some sound as it's ricocheting around at a certain speed, right? But if you speed the thing up, the sound speeds up, it goes down. So back to the one, the infinite whole, the undifferentiated ecology, the one. It's unconscious because it's too complex. It's too big for the human mind to grasp. The ego cannot put the one into language. It can say, we're all one. What happened today? Everything. Nothing. One. There's no awareness, right? You see? What did you do today? Everything. That's the same as nothing. That's the same as unconsciousness. So then we're going to have to translate all that went on today into a series of patterns that are customary for that cult. Like, the cult has jobs. What's that? It's a thing people get paid to do. What's payment, right? So they're all self-referential. You have the collapse without, but you have a system of patterns that organize. And so, how was your job today? How was your day today, right? It's not just the day; it's the evening and this and that. But we have these patterns, and then there are certain things that are noteworthy in that cult, right? How was your day today? Well, the vibration of the car as it was going on the freeway was uplifting. Meaning I felt that vibration and I felt uplifted. Now, some people get angry at that because it's not fitting within the box. I said, how was your day? I didn't ask you how the car was vibrating. But that's what I was noticing. That was my day, right? It's useless point talking to you, right? You won't talk like a normal person, right? How was your day? It was very nice. See, that's how a normal person. What was very nice? What was very nice? Well, let's see. The weather was very nice. Well, what does that mean? Well, it was 78 degrees and wasn't raining. Okay, and what about your bank account? Was that very nice? No, it went down. The balance went down. I spent this and I only made this. And so, okay, so that wasn't nice. So you were talking about the weather and ignoring your bank account, right? So reality is just vastly more complex than we can possibly capture in language. And it's unconscious at that complexity. So we dumb it down. The ego then identifies, clenches to the pattern, says, this is me, right? I said that. I thought that. I did that, right? And doing, of course, is just a series of words as well, right? What does this mean? What I did that. What was it? I was gesturing. No, I was waving my arms. No, I was exercising. No, I was doing a sacred symbol of pi, right? You don't know that one, do you? But the sacred symbol of pi. What was it, right? So we don't even have coherent maps for doing. We tell a story. I walked through my own house. Is it your own house? Right? Your house, who are you? Own, you own it? Well, what about after you die? Who owns it then? What about before you were born, right? Who owns it then, right? These ideas, in other words, the map of reality doesn't always line up nicely with reality. We just agree that, for the purposes of this cult, we will say, I walked through my own house, and you will get a picture of walking through doors and things. Now, why did you think I had doors? Right? Because it's normal, because it's the norm in the cult, right? So we just have habits, and the ego identifies. I identifies, right? That's me. I'm the one that walks through my house. I'm the one that says this. I'm the one that says that. And then, if we spend time with diverse human beings, then they will say, no, you're not. You're not that person. You're this person. And they will frame you in a different way. It's like, I never saw it that way. No, I'm this way. This is how I see myself. I have a different story about me than you do about me, right? But whatever it is, you identify with your story. I identify with my story, right? Because without any story, there's unconsciousness. There's just one, right? That's it, right? That would be this video, the whole video. Start the camera, one. For the end of time, one, and then for the end of time, right? I mean, that's it. So, in order to have consciousness, the one must be refracted into distinctions, into symbols called words, right? In mathematical language, which is the visual symbology of all of this, the circle, the sphere, has got to be refracted into, a series of distinctions. In this case, 4 distinctions. It's a square, so we have the one becomes the square. So that's the starting point for everything. And the meanings and the weightings are largely a function of energy density from other people around us. So let's take let's take 2 words within the one. One of them is hippopotamus, right? You've heard the word. I've rarely heard it. It's big. They like water. It's big. They like water. It's in Africa. That's kind of all that's loaded onto that symbol, for me, right? Big, wet, big, wet. Heard that a few times. You know, I've seen hippopotamuses on TV, big, wet, gray, right? So it's got some loading, right, on the symbol. And so if someone says hippopotamus, it kind of stirs up all those different loads, you know, those different sources have charges around them. And it's not a very charged word, hippopotamus. You know, I've never met anyone screaming, "Help, help! The hippopotamus are coming," right? Because if it did, it might have a big charge to it, right? If every day, let's say half of the street had been murdered, and it was always the hippopotamus, right? And, you know, ever since childhood, I open the door and there's always someone running by, "Help! The hippopotamus!" Chased by hippopotamus. And then we're going to a funeral and, you know, will the streets survive? Will the neighborhood go down, right? Hippopotamus terrorizing the neighborhood. You know, then it would have, you know, tons and tons of charge. And then what you'd see is, because it has all this charge from all of this observation, right? Survival and security of survival, the most basic in our hierarchy of needs, according to Abraham Maslow, just another symbol, another name for a symbol of a very complex being that we don't have time to learn all about, right? So we just give them a name and they're associated with this, a nice little box. And so we all want to live, and if hippopotamuses seem to be the single biggest cause of death, then you say hippopotamus and my eyes open up. Where's the hippopotamus, right? Because I've got all this charge. My body has been tuned to the symbol because the symbol has a connection with the hippopotamus, and the hippopotamus has a connection with whether I live or die that day, right? So it becomes a very potent symbol. Snake, hippopotamus, snake, you know. And so that becomes a physiological key, right? Pretty soon, all I have to hear is off in the distance, "Help, hippopotamus!" And I have to have a protocol. I have to have a response, a pattern of things that I think and do and say and ways that it be to escape the hippopotamus. And so that's what would, you know, but as it happens, I haven't grown up in that cult, in that environment. And so these intense biological charges are replaced by these little dots, right? So I hear hippopotamus. I might, if I'm busy thinking about something, quote, important, i.e. something I'm afraid of, then I might not even pay attention. Hippopotamus, right? But now we come to a different arena in our cult. It's called sex, right? What about it, right? Because ever since I can remember, right? Ever since I can remember, giants, right? When I was little, giants all around me were captivated by this word. You know, they couldn't even say it, right? It was like he who must not be named in the Harry Potter series, right? It's like, you know, sex. Unspeakable, right? It's like this word, sex, had the giants just behaving in the most bizarre manner. I've never seen giants behave so strangely. Tiptoeing around, looking furtively. Is anyone looking? Don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't. It's like, this is a bizarre thing, right? So it's a different map of another pattern, right? So there's hippopotamus and there's sex, right? And, you know, so what are all these highly charged things? Well, some of it, you just figure if it's got the entire world of giants enslaved, you know, terrified of it, it just must be a life and death thing, you know? They're not afraid of their cars. Nobody says, car, I'm getting into my CAR. And you know that people die in cars and get in car accidents. But it doesn't have the same mystique, right? Giants are not afraid of cars the way they are of sex. Don't mention it, but do you think so-and-so is, you know, nobody says, do you think so-and-so is driving over to there, right? So there's fascination. So there's, tremendous captivation. Then there's tremendous judgments. Then there's all these laws. Then there's all these secrets. Then there's all these bizarre physiological responses. Then there's all these shames. There's curse words. I mean, why is fucking a curse word? I mean, as I understand it, it means people having sex. Why is that a horrible thing? Why is cunt, right? Cunt. Isn't that a euphemism for a vagina? Like, why is that a curse? Isn't all human life coming out of a vagina? Didn't every single human being who ever lived, ever, come out of a vagina, right? So, right? Wanker, you mean someone who rubs their penis? I mean, where did these become filled with outrage, right? I guarantee if you take a sane person out of our cult and, raise a 5-year-old or whatever, a sane 5-year-old with a healthy cult, right, that has no particular fear or stigmatization around touching their body. The 5-year-old says, what's that? It says a penis. Oh, what does it do? Well, it pees, it produces semen, it makes pleasure. Fascinating, right? How do you do it? Well, this and that, and this time it flushes water and does this and does that. Oh, right. End of story, right? But, to be raised in our cult, right? Secret magazines. Like, parents, my parents were frightened that their children would find magazines of nudity. Right? Oh my God, no, don't do that. Don't. They were worked up about this. They weren't worked up that we weren't getting an education. They weren't worked up that we were humiliated. They weren't worked up that we nearly got run over here, this. I mean, that was just, but magazines, you would think that this was the most important event that had ever happened in the country, in the world, right? That this, by the physiology, right? The taboo, the suppression, the this. And so there's all these very bizarre things. And they're not very mathematical either, right? Because you're supposed to be, right, in a Christian cult, you're supposed to be heterosexual, meaning a man is supposed to like a woman, right? And a woman is supposed to like a man, right? And men are supposed to be attractive and confident and, have lots of sex, And women are supposed to not have any sex, right? This is changing a little bit. This is kind of I'm just talking about all the bizarre things that came through around this word, sex, right? And so women didn't want to be caught having sex with various, partners or whatever, but men thought it was cool and bragged about it. But the mathematics say that, if a man is going to have lots of sex with lots of women, the women have to have lots of sex with lots of men, right? It's kind of, you don't get one without the other, right? It's not like more men are having sex than women are in that little box where, you're supposed to. do it this way, right? So there was, and then there was this bizarre thing around homosexuality. I mean, I'm not gay, that was the worst of all, right? To be a man and be gay. That was the worst, when I was growing up, right? And so there was all this stuff around this. And so it's like, you're supposed to have sex with a woman, but you're not supposed to masturbate. You're supposed to love everyone, but not men, not your own gender. And so the schizophrenia, the lack of science, this becomes this huge word. It seems to have massive amounts of influence throughout the entire cult. Much of comedy in somewhat lack of creative expression is just making people nervous by saying things about sex, right? Touching people and bringing them pleasure. So, hippopotamus, sex. So that's our cult, right? With puritanical roots and all that. But, in other cults, sex is not a big deal. And hippopotamuses are a big deal, right? And so the symbols that are our words, we internalize the cult that we're in. And then we identify, we clench onto, we define ourselves by the pattern that we've been given. Now, here's the thing. Every cult, every culture, every pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that defines a cult, that defines a culture, has a probability field that exists on the infinite continuum of intelligence and well-being. So there is an infinite amount of well-being, right? Things can always be a little better. However you define better, they can always be a little bit more, right? It can always be a little bit hotter, if that's what you're measuring, or a little bit colder, or a little bit taller, or a little bit shorter, a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, right? So whatever you define as better, good, well-being, health, right? It can always be a little bit more, right? Optimum vitality. Well, you can always be like just 1% more energized, right? And then another 1%, right? So you've got an infinite continuum of well-being. And then intelligence is measured by the efficiency. We're surrounded by energy, and the energy that we pay attention to, that we put a lot of charge on, is time. I'm wasting time. I've only got limited amounts of time. I'm doing this. So put a huge amount of emphasis on time. Then money. What a ripoff. They charge me this amount of money for this. I've got to do this because I'll make more money. I've got to do this because it's on sale. So money is a form of energy that people focus on a lot in our cult. And then natural resources, the least, right? But we do, focus on that. It's like if we have to, if we have to bring in 300 tons of topsoil to grow one tomato, right? Oh, that's not very good. I want to, so we focus on saving time, saving money, and conserving natural resources, right? So we then have an efficiency quotient to convert the energy around us, the time, money, and natural resources, into sustainable well-being. And we like sustainable well-being, unlike cocaine highs or opium highs, because they don't crash, right? We like sustainable investments, basically. Like, I want to invest in something that gets better and better every year, doesn't just go up and then lose everything, and then do another one, goes up, and then I lose everything, right? I want a sustainable investment. So we all want to feel good. None of us want to feel bad. We all want to feel better. None of us want to feel worse. And what life is about, what intelligence is about, learning skills, navigating, etc., is we want to expend the least amount of energy necessary to feel sustainably better. And then hedonic adaptation kicks in, so we're not satisfied with just feeling 10% better, or we put in $1 and it grew to $1.10, and then it just stayed there for the next 100 years. No, we want it to get sustainably better, right? And better, right? We want a rate of progress, or we want a return on investment. And a great investment, a great investor takes $1. An intelligent investor takes $1 and then turns it into $2. Takes $2 and turns them into $4, right? An investor that doesn't know what they're doing, they take $1 and they turn it into $0. Then they take $2 and turn that into $0. And they take $4 and turn that into $0, and then they're out of money, right? So that's not an intelligent investor. An intelligent investor takes energy and converts it into sustainable well-being more efficiently than they did before, more efficiently than average, right? And that's an intelligent investor in life, in money, in whatever it is that we're investing. But everything that we're investing in, we believe will bring about greater well-being, or we don't make the investment, right? So we're investing in our belief in what will bring about sustainable well-being. That's what we're doing. So we have this endless continuum of well-being and an endless continuum of intelligence, because there's always a more intelligent way to convert energy into sustainable well-being, right? We just aren't intelligent enough to know it yet, right? But there is. So a system, right? A system is a protocol for transforming energy into well-being, right? That's the goal of every system, a government, a job, whatever it is, a relationship, a contract. It's a system for taking energy, and you follow this protocol, and this protocol has a cost in time and money and natural resources, and it has a yield in sustainable well-being, right? It has a yield. If you send everyone to American high school on these big yellow buses, you have to buy the buses, you have to mine the steel, you have to take the time to drive the buses and drive the kids, and you tell them to go to this room and this room and this room and this room. Then you spend $65,000 of public money, which you take from people. They don't usually want to give it to you, but so you say, well, we'll take everything you have unless you give us taxes, right? We're going to spend $65,000 per person to shuffle these kids in and out of these buses and from this room to this room and this room. And then they're supposed to be educated, and they're supposed to be happy that they're educated. They're not, but let's not get bogged down into details. And then they're supposed to be able to use that to get a job, to make money, to be even more happy with the money, which many of them are not. But again, let's not get bogged down into details. And that's a system, right? You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you die, right? That's the system. And it has a yield. How many people are ecstatically happy with that system? How much energy does it take? How much time does it take? How much money does it take? How much natural resources does it take? And that's the system, right? And remember, we can't possibly deal with reality because it's big, because it doesn't have labels, and because the words are an illusion, right? They're just symbols that we've put onto segments of a pattern. You take a light spectrum and you say, this is the red. Why? Because we said so, right? It's just an infinite spectrum of longer and shorter waves, faster and slower waves, right? There's no end. It just gets faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until we can't even keep track of it. Slower and slower and longer, and then we can't see it. We can't keep track of it. It just goes on infinitely. So we get a yield, right? And that yield determines our intelligence. We take this amount of time, this amount of money, and this amount of natural resources, and we get this amount of sustainable well-being. That's how intelligent we are. And we can always be more intelligent, right? We could make it a more complex system. That was a 5 system. Here's a 6 system, right? So it's a little bit more complex. As you move towards complexity, you move closer to reality, because reality is infinitely complex. So, if you keep making symmetrical complexity, you got a 12-pointed system, right? A system with 12 distinctions, right? We could just have a clock that the hand goes over here, we say it's night, and then the hand goes over here and it's day. But we have 12 points on the clock. Why 12? Why not 24, right? Why don't we just have a 24 points on the clock and just say it's 12, it's 13, it's 14, it's 15. Why don't we do that? We could. We just don't. Right? It's rather arbitrary. Why isn't it a 17-pointed clock or a 30-pointed clock? Just a clock with 30 points on it. What time should we meet? Let's meet at 29. Why not? It's completely random, right? But we tend to be interested in things that relate to our scale, right? Most of us don't want to meet at the millisecond or the second. Within 2 or 3 minutes is comfortable in current day reality. I'll call you around 5 o'clock. I call it 5:03. That's fine. I'll call you at 5 o'clock. I called you 2 weeks later. That's not fine, right? Particularly if I'm waiting, for information, energy in a pattern that is going to tell me something about what I need to do now. But this is the system, and there's always a better system, a more complex system that's more efficient at converting energy into sustainable well-being. And that's called evolution, right? Evolution is going from a symbol like this, black and white, to a symbol like this with 12 distinctions. That's evolution. The evolution of consciousness, not the evolution of reality. Reality has always been infinitely complex, but it's the evolution of our understanding of reality. I thought there was the good people and the bad people. Now, there's 12 kinds of people. There's 24 kinds of people. There's 50 kinds of people. And all of them have a cycle, right? So they're going towards something that they like and are excited, as they're falling in love, as they're falling out of love and grieving, right? They have a circle, right? And so there's, and then, they're a good person when they did this, and they're a bad person when they did that, and then they're a good person at 6 a.m., but every time, then at midnight, right? Back to the whole sex thing, right? Pornography is bad. It's bad, right? So this otherwise perfectly good person, right, became a bad person. Every night at midnight, right, they become bad, right? And so, why? Because I said so. Because I connected those words, bad and porn, right? Well, bad usually attempts to have some correlation with suffering, right? That's bad because pain results, and we don't want pain, right? But what about achieving something, right? What about rescuing a child in a fire? Maybe there's going to be a little pain, a little heat, right? So it gets difficult to create a sane map of reality because there's just so much complexity. Whatever you say is true in some situation from some point of view, and whatever you say is nuts from another point of view in another situation, right? Your child is burning alive in the building, and you decide to just focus on accepting what is in reality. I'm just going to take some breaths. Whatever happens, the guru says, don't interrupt your meditation. This is your time, right? And so, as your child burns into a cinder, you finish the 15 minutes, you made a commitment, you had integrity, and unfortunately, there's not much left of the baby after all that, the 15 minutes in the high flame and stuff like that, or no time to call the fire department, right? So there's always, whatever you do, commit to doing your me time, your meditation, your this. Except when your child is being burned alive in front of you, and you could easily turn on the hose and stop the fire, right? Maybe accept that, or are you a radical? An extremist? Nothing is more important than God, and I'm praying to God, right? And God could be testing me, right? So it's. That's obviously that's not a very useful map of reality, right? If you believe your ideas that God's an extremist and wants to burn your child and you should pray and let God rescue him and stuff, you probably suffer, right? You certainly miss your child, right? And so these maps are not real. There is no map of reality that is reality. That would be reality. These maps are not real. But because they're the only thing that we know, we're conscious of, we worship the symbol. We fall in love. We get attached. Our ego gets attached to the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we say, that's me. I say those things. I said those things yesterday. I said them today, and that's me. I'm doing that, right? So the ego gets attached. We believe the map, right? That's right. It does say Huckleberry there. Google is right. This is real, right? Google said in 300 paces there'd be a lane called Huckleberry. And the sign says so too. So Google and the sign are in cahoots, right? They both say that this is Huckleberry. There's no huckleberries, but that doesn't matter because we're focused on the symbol of reality. And they're right. To Google and the signs and the people who built Google, they all agree that this is Huckleberry Lane. They all agree it's 300 meters. And they all agree that a meter is this big. And so it's all true, right? That it's real. It's real. No. You believe in a meter, and you believe in a sign, and you believe in the English language, and you believe in the word left and right. And because your mind is filled with all those symbols, you think that's what reality is. It's not. It's just a bunch of symbols that you've believed in, right? And the evolution of the cult, the evolution of the culture, the evolution of the ego, the evolution of mathematics, the evolution of the system is towards complexity and towards symmetry of symbology. The complexity and the symmetry of the symbology correlates with the intelligence, with the efficiency with which energy can be transformed into sustainable well-being, right? For example, just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about here, are liquids good? Yes or no? You've only got a black and white symbol, right? You've got the crudest of symbols. Are liquids good? They're good, they're bad. Should you drink liquids? Liquids are good, so you should drink liquids. So here's some gasoline, drink it. Here's some orange juice, drink it. Here's some water, drink it. Here's some arsenic, drink it. It's a liquid, right? See, it's not useful, is it? Right? No. Some liquids are good. So now what you need is distinctions. You need a complex model of liquids. Orange juice, arsenic, water, gasoline. Those are just a few, but then you've got, 1 cup of orange juice with 2 cups of gasoline. Would you drink that? Yes or no, right? Could you start a fire? Will the gasoline still light, right? So do you pour liquids on gasoline? Do you pour liquids on a fire? Does it matter? Kerosene, propane, water, gasoline, diesel. Which one, right? Which one do you put on a fire and in what situation? So if you want to succeed, if you want to make decisions that improve sustainable well-being, you need a very complex map of reality, a complex model through which to relate to reality. And if it's very one-sided, like you only develop this side, you've got a skewed perspective, right? Because balance is one of the ideas, one of the abstract ideas, the principles developed in language that helps us see that you don't get black without white, right? So if you really want to understand good, you have to understand bad, right? You can't understand good without bad, and you can't understand bad without good, right? You've got to understand both, right? So if you really want to understand one, you have to understand the opposite. And so if you spend too much time here, your vision is clouded, right? It's like, is the accelerator good without a brake? I always accelerate. Every time I get, let's get there faster, right? And I crash into the wall on the other side. I get there fast, really fast. You have no idea how fast I get there. But then I have to go to the hospital because I don't have any brakes, because brakes are bad. We don't want to slow down. Time is money, right? And so when you have a polarity, it's just too simple. It's not useful. So that's why as you move towards, a 12-sided system rather than just a triangle, you're moving into complex categories of patterns, which then can be combined in different ways. And if you're a chef, is flour good or bad? In what? Well, don't pour raw flour over a salad. It's starchy and ruins the taste, right? But a little bit of flour in the cheese sauce thickens it up, right? And so that way it doesn't run off the vegetables, so you can have the sauce and the vegetable in one bite because it didn't run off, right? And so, we're looking at distinctions. Now, evolution, human evolution, is the evolution of distinctions. It's the evolution of language towards more and more symmetry and more complexity, leading to grace. And we can see that more clearly mathematically, right? If you had a bicycle tire and it was shaped like that with the spoke here, you're better off walking, right? Because your two legs form a circle, right? They're always leaning in towards one, they simulate a circle, right? But if you keep adding complexity and just keep adding, points, eventually, if they're symmetrical and more of them, they get closer and closer to a circle. And by the time you've got maybe 50 or 60 points that are all equally spaced from the center, like spokes going out, it gets smoother and smoother and smoother and smoother and smoother and smoother, and you get closer and closer to the circle. That's called grace. So that's called intelligence. It is intelligent to design something that makes it easy, that's more efficient to convert energy into sustainable well-being. That's what a wheel is. That's why we all do circular wheels. Evolution points to change, to improvement, to growth, towards complexity, towards creativity, towards grace and symmetry. However, the more traumatized we are. Trauma just means that, like, the ego identifies, this is whatever the pattern is, the ego identifies and says, this is me. That's me. That's my pattern. I think this, I feel this, I do this, I say this. I am like this. That's me. That's my face, right? It's always there, right? But if the face gets burned off, if the mind gets tortured, if I get run over by multiple tanks, right? If I'm still conscious, the ego is shattered, right? The pattern is all broken up, right? This bit was deleted, that's unstable, this jumbled mess, and I can't recognize myself. I don't know who I am, right? And so identity begins in layers. Throughout our life, we have a 1-year-old pattern, which is often just one of screaming and smiling. Screaming when we're hungry and stuff, and smiling when we're happy. And that kind of works as a 1-year-old. And then we maybe develop a exploring and screaming and smiling. So now it's a, it's a threefold pattern: exploring, screaming, and smiling, right? And we do that as like a 2-year-old. And then as a 3-year-old, we, do that pattern, and then we add in some little jumping around and exploring and testing hypothesis of, when I do this, what does mom do? And I don't do that because she always she always gets frowns and looks upset. So we develop these models of identity, these patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. As an infant, a child, we're just copying. And as we start to think, we begin to iterate and explore our range. Now, if nothing traumatic happens, we just get more and more, esoteric and exploring more until we find what works, right? We get bigger and bigger. What about this? And what about that? And what about having sex with this person and that person and doing, and trying this work and trying that work is so exciting, all these different things. But when we experience trauma, the pattern is rudely interrupted. It's shattered. We encounter a pattern bigger than ourselves, and it destroys our pattern. And the ego is terrified. I don't know who I am because I've lost my pattern, my coherence. What do I do? And so the more traumatized and the more painfully traumatic and the more disoriented a person is. So you have pain, you have fear of pain, and you have shock, you have disorientation. The more of that there is, the more regression takes place, right? The more we go back and feel like a child, we feel 6 years old and terrified of being punished, whatever it was. Whatever it was, like, you can see identity kind of refining, getting more and more intelligent in a natural state. It gets, you learn more complexity, you understand more things, you learn more competencies, get better at things in a healthy environment. So you're iterating, you're becoming more and more evolutionary, right? You're evolving your relationship with all that is, with more and more data points to refine the pattern. However, the stronger the pain is, the more repetitive the pain is, the more frightening the pain is, the bigger the pain, the more helpless you feel, the more you regress, the more you knock down, to a point where you can go all the way to 2-year-old terror. Right. Curl up in a ball, because the more trauma you are in, the more you need certainty of who I am. And the most certain identity, the most certain pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is the infant, is the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, or when I last felt safe at 2 years old, or when I was last traumatized at 1 year old, or whatever it was. And so trauma leads to age regression. leads to identity regression, right? You can traumatize someone into an obedient child, right? Someone is independent, they're cool, they're tough, right? No one's going to tell me what to do. And then you chop off their legs and drive them around the back of a pickup truck, right? And you flash lights in their faces for 36 hours. And you give them dissociative drugs. And they lose their identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they think. They don't know what to think. They don't know how to respond. Whatever they've done in the past is not working by definition. They're in massive amounts of shock, pain, disorientation, dissociation, right? In that state, they become infantile. I need mommy, right? I need help. Someone, God, farmers that lose all their crops, they pray to God, right? They don't believe in God when they have lots of money in the bank, etc. But when they're losing it all, when they're losing the farm, they pray to God, right? Because at one time, when they were 6 years old, they believed in God. And nothing the older parts of them are doing. They plowed the field, they got another loan, they did this, the drought's still happening. They go back to the root, right? The tree has been growing here, and then it branched off here, and there's going all these esoteric branches. I'm lost. I'm going to go back and back and back and back, right, to the root. I will regress to the original fork, and I'll try the other fork maybe as I grow. Maybe I'll go over here, right? Had a friend, his wife left him for his best friend, shattered his identity, right? So he took himself all the way back to where some part of him decided to be heterosexual, deleted that, decided to be gay, right? Let's try that pattern, right? Being heterosexual is devastating for him, right? And so let's be homosexual, right? Go back, regress, take a different path, right? Because we all want to feel better. We don't want to feel worse. And severe trauma is the worst a human can feel, the worst an ego can feel. And so if the forks that we've done, if the pattern that we've created, that we were so confident in, leads to life-crippling trauma and PTSD, then I don't want any part of this me that became that, right? So I'm going to regress. I'm going to go regress. I'm going to feel 5-year-old, and I need a parent, right? I need someone to take care of me. I need someone to help me. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do it, right? I don't want to grow up into that. I don't want that to happen again. I don't want this to happen again. I don't want this to happen again. Let me try another way. Another way, someone take care of me, right? So I'm regressed, right? I'm a 2-year-old, frantically, the breast has been away too long. Right? I want to go back to the time when it was safe, right? That's regression, right? So life is an identity generator, at least for human beings, right? Every human being is different, right? Every human being takes a slightly different path to go to a slightly different destination. And the most valuable thing that a human being can bring to life, to evolution, to the world, is a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is vastly more intelligent than the pattern they were given. A pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that yields substantially higher sustainable well-being while consuming less time, money, and natural resources than the status quo. And then spread that pattern to as many people as possible. And you have transcendence, you have evolution, you have growth, you have sustainability, you have higher levels of well-being. That's the best case scenario. That you take whatever dumb, half-baked code your cult gave you for thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Has you running around in circles, trying to be happy this way, but feeling miserable, doing that, and then that didn't work out, and you did this, and you hate it, and had you letting go of that and recreating your thoughts, your feelings out of those thoughts, your words as reflections of those thoughts, your behaviors as emanations of those thoughts, your way of being, the synergy of all that you created to create something that has never been before, that is more symmetrical, that is more complex, that has more grace, more intelligence, that yields higher levels of sustainable well-being than the pattern, than the code of your cult that was given to you. And that is the normal progression from child, import the code without question, adolescent, throw it out in a fit of rebellion, and then iterate and synergize as an adult. And do it again, and do it again. Iterate what you iterated. Go over it, Where's the waste? Where's the waste? I'm spending a lot of time with this person creating unnecessary suffering. Okay, let's change the pattern. Can we connect well-being? No, not so much. Here, maybe. But the real shift is connecting with this person over here in this way. Now, same amount of time, same amount of money, same amount of energy, natural resources, but the yield is much higher. Now we've got greater levels of sustainable well-being. So this is iteration. This is evolution. This is your gift to life. Right? The worst thing you can do is not understand the pattern you were given, throw it all out, think you know it better without paying any attention, and you create something worse that doesn't work. It causes much more suffering and unnecessary confusion stuff than the cult, than the pattern you were given, right? That's devolution, right? It's rebelling without understanding the blessing, right? Because all patterns are on the intelligence continuum. You can do something that's less intelligent than average or more intelligent than average. That's your contribution to life. That's your gift on the path of growth. You can never iterate from a place of PTSD and trauma and terror, right? You can only regress, right? And so you use as much of the cult code as you can to avoid trauma, and you use bits and pieces of exceptional cult code to heal PTSD, to transcend it. And then you can go back to your creative exploring and kind of getting a sense of like, what paths do you follow? And where does it lead, right? Where does it lead? Because life bets on everything and everyone. 99.9% of every pattern in which energy resides today will be extinct or greatly iterated in 1 billion years. And 1 billion years is nothing to a multiverse that has trillions upon trillions of years to explore intelligence, to explore life in all of its infinite possibilities.